September 3rd, 1260, a valley in northern Palestine called Ain Jalut. For 40 years, the Mongol army has been unstoppable. They've conquered everything, from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe. They've destroyed Baghdad, slaughtered millions, and left a trail of devastation unlike anything the world has ever seen. Now they're marching on Egypt. And if Egypt falls, nothing stands between the Mongols and the complete conquest of the Islamic world and Europe. But in this valley, an army of slave soldiers is about to do what no one else has been able to do: stop them. This is the Battle of Ain Jalut, the day the invincible met their end. To understand what happens at Ain Jalut, we need to understand what made the Mongols so devastating. In 1206, Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes and created the most efficient military system the medieval world had ever seen. The Mongol army was built on three foundations: mobility, discipline, and terror. Every Mongol warrior could ride from childhood and fire a composite bow accurately from horseback at full gallop. They could survive for weeks on dried meat and mare's milk, covering up to 100 miles in a single day. But the real innovation was organizational. Genghis Khan structured his army in units of 10. 10 men formed a squad, 10 squads formed 100, 10 hundreds formed 1,000. Each unit had absolute loyalty to the one above it. The discipline was brutal. If one man deserted, his entire unit of 10 was executed. This created an army where abandoning your brothers meant condemning them to death. And then there was their use of terror as a weapon. When the Persian city of Merv resisted in 1221, the Mongols killed an estimated 700,000 people over 13 days. Persian chronicler Juvayni recorded that each Mongol soldier was assigned to execute 300 to 400 civilians. This wasn't senseless violence, it was calculated strategy. When news of Merv spread, the next cities surrendered without resistance. Terror became more effective than siege weapons. By 1227, when Genghis Khan died, his empire stretched from Korea to the Caspian Sea. His descendants would push even further. In 1253, Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu launched the conquest of the Islamic world with 150,000 troops. His first major target was Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate and the intellectual heart of Islamic civilization for 5 centuries. The Caliph al-Mustasim fatally underestimated the threat. Despite warnings from his advisors, he refused to adequately prepare the city's defenses or seek military alliances. He believed the sanctity of Baghdad and divine protection would deter the Mongols. He was catastrophically wrong. Hulagu's army arrived in January 1258. Using Chinese siege engineers and advanced tactics, they breached the walls in just 2 weeks. What followed was systematic destruction. Modern historians estimate between 200,000 and 1 million people were killed. The House of Wisdom, containing centuries of scientific and philosophical texts, was destroyed. Witnesses reported so many books were thrown into the Tigris River that it ran black with ink, and you could walk across on the volumes. The Caliph himself was executed, ending the 500-year Abbasid dynasty. A chronicler who survived wrote, "The Tigris ran red with blood, then black with ink, then red again." By summer 1258, Hulagu controlled all of Persia and Mesopotamia. His army pushed into Syria, taking Aleppo and Damascus. The Mongol Empire now stretched continuously from China to the Mediterranean. Only one major Muslim power remained, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The Mamluks were unique in medieval military history. Mamluk means owned in Arabic. These were slave soldiers captured or purchased as boys from regions like the Caucasus, Central Asia, and the Turkic steppes, then brought to Egypt for military training. They were converted to Islam, educated in Arabic, and trained intensively in cavalry warfare. When they reached military age, they were freed and became professional soldiers. The most skilled rose to positions of command. This system created a meritocratic military elite. Unlike feudal armies where command came from birth, every Mamluk leader had earned his position through proven ability in combat. In 1250, the Mamluks had overthrown their own sultan and taken control of Egypt. By 1260, they were led by Sultan Qutuz, with his most talented commander being a man named Baybars. Baybars had been captured as a boy during Mongol raids in Crimea, sold into slavery, and eventually joined the Mamluks in Egypt. He was a brilliant tactician who had studied Mongol warfare extensively. When Hulagu sent ambassadors to Cairo demanding submission, they delivered a brutal message. "We have destroyed nations and kingdoms. What happened to Baghdad will happen to Cairo unless you surrender immediately." Sultan Qutuz made a shocking decision. He executed the Mongol ambassadors. In medieval diplomacy, this was a declaration of total war with no possibility of negotiation. The Mamluks were going to fight. In July 1260, Qutuz led the Mamluk army of approximately 20,000 cavalry north from Egypt. Their target was the Mongol force in Syria, commanded by General Kitbuka, numbering roughly equal strength. But the Mamluks had a crucial advantage that few understood. They were also steppe warriors. Many had been captured from the same regions that produced Mongol soldiers. They fought as mounted archers using composite bows and light armor for mobility, just like their opponents. This was not a clash between heavy European knights and mobile steppe cavalry. This was steppe warrior against steppe warrior. Baybars understood Mongol tactics intimately. He knew they preferred open terrain where their cavalry could maneuver freely. He knew they used feigned retreats to draw enemies into ambushes. He knew their psychological warfare. Broke armies before combat began. If the Mamluks met the Mongols on open ground in a straightforward engagement, they would likely lose. Baybars needed terrain that would neutralize Mongol tactical advantages. He found it at Ain Jalut, a valley in southeastern Galilee. The valley was flanked by hills with rocky, scrub-covered terrain that would restrict cavalry maneuvers and prevent easy flanking. The plan was simple but dangerous. Baybars would take a smaller force into the valley as bait. The main army under Qutuz would hide in the surrounding hills. When the Mongols pursued Baybars into the valley, Qutuz would attack from both flanks. It was essentially using the Mongols' own favorite tactic against them. On the morning of September 3rd, 1260, Baybars positioned approximately 8,000 cavalry in Ain Jalut Valley. The remaining 12,000 under Qutuz concealed themselves in the hills. The trap was set. When Kitbuka's Mongol army arrived mid-morning, they saw what appeared to be the main Mamluk force in the valley, with limited room to retreat. For a commander who had won countless battles, it looked like an opportunity. Kitbuka ordered his forces to attack. The Mongol cavalry charged into Ain Jalut Valley. Both sides exchanged volleys of arrows as they closed. The Mamluks held formation, returning fire, taking casualties, but maintaining discipline. After roughly an hour of intense combat, Baybars gave the signal. His force began a controlled retreat, fighting as they withdrew deeper into the valley. To Kitbuka, it appeared his enemy was breaking. He committed his full force to pursuit, pushing deeper into the valley. This was exactly what Baybars had anticipated. At the critical moment, Qutuz launched his hidden forces from both sides of the valley. 12,000 Mamluk cavalry crashed into the Mongol flanks simultaneously. The Mongols, caught in mid-pursuit and unable to maneuver effectively in the confined terrain, tried to reform their lines. But Baybars' retreating force turned and charged back into the fray. The Mongols were surrounded on three sides, with the rocky terrain blocking easy escape routes. The battle became a brutal close-quarters melee. Kitbuka, an experienced commander who had fought from China to Syria, died fighting. His army, which had never experienced defeat, found itself trapped and overwhelmed. Those who could escape fled. Most could not. By sunset on September 3rd, 1260, the Battle of Ain Jalut was over. Of approximately 20,000 Mongol warriors who entered the valley, fewer than 2,000 escaped. The invincible had been defeated. The immediate impact was dramatic. Damascus, which the Mongols had occupied, rose in revolt and massacred the garrison. Mamluk forces quickly secured Syria. News spread rapidly across the medieval world. In Cairo, celebrations erupted. Across the Muslim world, from North Africa to Central Asia, communities that had been preparing for annihilation suddenly had hope. European kingdoms, which had watched the Mongol advance with growing alarm, recognized that a Mongol conquest of Egypt would have left them next in line. But perhaps most significantly, the defeat changed Mongol strategic calculations. Hulagu planned to return with overwhelming force to avenge the loss. However, internal Mongol politics intervened. His cousin Berk, who ruled the Golden Horde and had converted to Islam, was outraged by the destruction of Baghdad. In 1262, Berk attacked Hulagu's territories. The unified Mongol Empire that had conquered half the world began fighting a civil war. Hulagu never returned to Egypt. The westward expansion stopped at Ain Jalut. The battle didn't destroy the Mongol Empire, which would endure for another century, but it marked the limit of their expansion and proved they could be defeated through superior tactics and preparation. Ain Jalut was more than a military victory. It preserved the Mamluk Sultanate, which would go on to stop the Crusader states and rule Egypt and Syria for over 250 years. It protected the Islamic world from the total devastation that had consumed Baghdad. And it prevented Mongol armies from advancing into Africa and Europe at a moment when few forces could have stopped them. The battle demonstrated that even the most overwhelming military superiority could be countered with terrain advantage, tactical deception, and soldiers willing to stake everything on a desperate plan. One valley, one battle, one September day in 1260. The day an army of former slaves stopped the most feared military force in human history and changed the course of civilization. This was the Battle of Ain Jalut. If this story showed you a side of medieval history you hadn't seen before, consider subscribing for more documentary content on the battles and events that shaped our world. What other pivotal moments in history would you like us to cover? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.